Frank Henenlotter made 3 films in the 1980s that are so good, so bizarre and original, so true to the spirit of the time, and just actually full-on boundary pushing, that any other horror filmmaker worth their salt is probably in secret envious that they haven't achieved something so weird and innovative themselves. I know I am. The first was Basket Case, which we've covered in a franchise video in the past, and the last was Frankenhooker, which is one of the most just pure fun movies of this time. And in the middle, the least known one, which we will be covering here today, was Brain Damage, which tells the story of a young man who becomes addicted to the fluids of a potato-sized parasite, which injects this directly into his brain in return for his help in assisting him and procuring him with human brains to eat. It is not all that unlike that episode of Billy and Mandy with the Voltaire song, if you remember that one. Now, the most clear and common reading of this film is in relation to drug use, and it's not wrong, but I do find it to be a little boring. And if it was the only layer to this thing, then I really truly wouldn't find it interesting enough to do a video about it. But to cover that aspect of it, Brian does these self-destructive things in the film to serve the parasite in return to get this high from him. The parasite is a drug itself, one that he tries to quit and goes through withdrawals over, one that ruins his life, where he ends up taking his own life to rid himself and the world of this terrible monkey that he literally keeps on his back. Henenlotter himself has said that the film is about his relationship to trying to kick cocaine, and I think all of that is fine. But it's very on the nose, very surface level, very like, I'm gonna make an allegorical movie about racism and these are supposed to be the white people and these are supposed to be the black people. Dr. Seuss Sneetches kind of energy. Very obvious, you know what I mean? The kind of work where I think it lacks any real in-depth applicable nuance. And if that was all that was here, I really don't think that I would fuck with Brain Damage all that much. Because to be honest, I don't think that these aspects of the film are very good. They're not clever enough. The parasite is clearly supposed to represent drugs, and in that, I don't think he's saying anything particularly interesting. And it's funny because that is what the movie is actually supposed to be about. It's like this hardcore morality tale about how drugs are bad, but it's all very 1950s PSA about it. But within this, he makes something that seemingly almost accidentally goes full-on psychosexual, which I just love. And now some of this imagery is absolutely 100% intentional, but I don't know if all of it was or not. Like for instance with an obvious one. When trying to find a fresh brain victim for his new little pet habit, he descends into the underworld of 1980s New York. So far down into it in fact that he lands up at a nightclub called Hell, where he seduces this woman and shoves the parasite into her mouth by tricking her into thinking that she's about to suck him off. This is not even subtle. This isn't a problem. I don't think that Henenlotter had a subtle bone in his whole body. It isn't even the only time that the parasite is shown exiting from his genital region. And in this, we have this narrative where violence and sex are smashed together and are presented as one and the same. And this mixed with the intensity of how he filmed nighttime in 1980s New York just builds to this feeling that is almost greater than words, something which must be experienced to be fully understood, both within its setting and also within its tone. And mixed with the monster-based subject matter, this makes it a sister film to his previous work, Basket Case. Dwayne and Belial even make a cameo appearance in this work, although Belial himself does not leave his basket and is not physically seen. Similarly in this, the parasite Aylmer is named after an ancient demon much like Belial is. I love how Henenlotter is a filmmaker who's just totally unashamed to basically present you with a cartoon design, and then tell you to take it seriously and just fucking deal with it. Most of the looks in his movies, and particularly this one here and in his later Basket Case films, are just so totally bizarre that most wouldn't have the artistic stones to just go there with it. Like, we've got stop motion, we've got puppets. It's like a half step away from being a movie about that dumb alien frog joke in Spaceballs. Some would call this bad taste, but to me it really is one of those examples of good bad taste. And when you see a sequence like when Brian gets high for the first time in the film, and it is just filmed so masterfully, then you know that the rest of the corny shit in the film is 100% on purpose, and that Henenlotter is very much in on the joke. But getting back to the sexual nature of the piece, this is a movie that was made in New York amongst art people in 1988, and I think that you can see the remnants of the AIDS disaster all over this piece. Not just in the paranoia, sexual energy amongst its characters and the way that it is shot, but just the overall tone of dread that is draped over this whole project. It isn't a pleasant film. You don't have a good time watching this. And there are just parts of this that are like very overtly gay, like Brian trying to find his next victim for his parasite in the building's showers. And one can see his pale, thin complexion while covered with sores as a continuation of that drug addiction theme. But to me, when I look at these images, all I can think of is AIDS. And with the way that it is filmed, this is just a cruising scene. This guy looks like if Tom of Finland did a portrait of the gay semi-icon Victor Hugo. He's got like the most 80s gay porn kind of body. And for me personally watching this, AIDS is a constant running theme throughout the piece. Like, everyone that Brian has a sexual encounter with, then immediately soon after dies. Their very essence is sucked out of them. The thing that made them a human being with thoughts and feelings and emotions. They're just gone. And again, none of this may have been intentional, but they were making this in New York in the 80s when all of the death was just all over the city. When all the biggest gay figures were just disappearing quietly every week. Where the very culture of the city was shifting. You couldn't avoid it, you just couldn't ignore it. It was on your television when you came home at night. It would have been a topic of conversation almost every day of your life. That's just what living in New York in the art scene would have been like in these years, even if you were straight. And I can really feel that energy being talked about here in a safe way, which, you know, is one of the many powers of genre fiction. To talk about these things that are uncomfortable in a way that are palatable to people who normally would not be receptive to such messaging. What's funny too is that there is technically a straight romance subplot in this movie, but it is so half-hearted and underdeveloped that anytime it's not on screen, you just totally forget about it until it pops back up again. And even that plotline has strong gay undertones to it to me. Where this girlfriend has been hurt because this guy has turned his back on her and put his attentions elsewhere into this new secret part of his life that he feels shame over and doesn't want people to know about. And whether that's drugs or whether that's gay sex, I don't think really matters, because within the context of the narrative, the metaphors both work in the same. But whatever it is undeniable that he has turned his attention to this phallic thing, right? This thing with its own strong masculine energy to it, that sucks things out of people or else it will just die. This leech. This thing protruding out of him that this other man attempts to grab and just takes a hold of it and shakes it vigorously. This thing that penetrates inside of him and sprays its liquids around inside of him. Something which he loves and craves so much that he will do anything to get it. Something which he constantly thinks about, to where it even just changes his brain chemistry. Not to mention the fact that the drugs that this worm sprays inside of him colors the world to make it look like a fucking Andy Warhol painting. This relationship with this woman ends with her death, but in a super interesting way where he leans in to give her this passionless, sexless, open-eyed Judas kiss of betrayal. And then whatever this thing is inside of him, it just sucks the life force right out of her right there in the subway. It's a really dark moment in this film. One about addiction, compulsion, obsession, the connections that people share where one values the other more, and about the destructive qualities that any of these types of behaviors can have in one's life if they begin to control your mind like a parasite. And Henenlotter, has been very open about this queer interpretation of the film, and argues that it is a very valid way to look at what he's presenting on the screen. And I just find this answer to be so funny and weirdly charming in its own honesty about the subject. It's also just like, to me, the most old New York answer to give to this question. That's just how it hits my ears. He said, one of the guys at the film lab was saying, "Oh my god, you're making some kind of weird statement here. You've got a monster that looks phallic, talking about his juice. What can I say? It's obviously there. I didn't set out to put it there, that's simply what the imagery turned out to be, and I'm not going to change the imagery just to eliminate that." And you know what? Kudos to him. At least he says it's there. Unlike a lot of other filmmakers who make queer works, even if somewhat unintentionally, and then try to walk it back after the fact. Most notably like how Jack Sholder and David Chaskin have always treated Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And you know what? I don't really love the ending of this, but I also get where he's going with it as an artist. Where these two old addicts try and steal the parasite from him before having their brains eaten out by it. And just to rid the earth of this curse, he takes his own life along with the parasites. It's a bleak ending to this, It's a sad story all around, one where addiction is not overcome, where instead we have succumbed too much, ventured too far into the depths, and have been sucked away by what we found, body and soul.